The night shift at Mercy General Boston always carried the smell of burnt coffee and that sterile white light that made time itself seem suspended. The wall clock read 11:17 p.m., and I, Natalie Moore, was finishing the chart for an overdose case in ER Room 4. My worn-out nurse shoes whispered that the body had limits, but life never waited. The door burst open. 2 paramedics rushed in, pushing a gurney like a gust of icy wind. Male, 5 years old, unconscious. Tonic-clonic seizure, no response to initial dose. The lead paramedic's voice was crisp, mechanical, like a metronome. I dropped my pen. Instinct replaced thought. 2 other nurses fell in beside me. Dr. Harris, the senior resident, snapped on his gloves and barked orders like bullets monitor. Arterial blood gas. CBC, electrolytes, prolactin, diazepam standard dose. The child looked impossibly small under the white sheet body jerking in rigid waves. I took the left side, checking the IV line. Line's patent, I said, adjusting the drip without taking my eyes off him. Under the cold light, his lips were tinted a pale blue. Not oxygen cyanosis, but a stubborn, eerie shade that made my heart sink. O2 mask at 10 liters per minute. Dr. Harris didn't look up. The monitor screamed. Numbers flickered like rain hammering a window pane. I leaned closer, flashlight in hand. Pupillary response slow and uneven. The right hand twitched harder than the left, fingertips trembling fine. The skin beneath his eyes carried a faint yellow hue, subtle but speaking volumes. In the ER, the truth often isn't what shouts the loudest. It's what whispers to your instincts. I inhaled. Doctor, this doesn't look like primary epilepsy. I think more half a step back. Dr. Harris cut me off, eyes locked on the ventilator. Increase the dose. If unresponsive, we treat status epilepticus. I moved back exactly half a step, enough not to block him, but not enough to be silent. When family isn't there, a nurse stands between life and protocol. And I'd already lost a child once, not to lack of medicine, but to obedience. The monitor alarm trembled, heart rate skipping like a broken stair. My voice came out low but firm. Harris, give me 10 seconds. Asymmetry, sluggish pupils, yellow sclera possible, Reyes variant with metabolic crisis. If we keep treating for epilepsy, he'll crash. Dr. Harris finally looked up, face taut between fatigue and pride. Natalie, this is an emergency, not a debate. Exactly, I said, hand gripping the crash cart, pulling it close, ready for what instinct screamed was coming. Check blood ammonia. Page Dr. Morrison and open the metabolic crisis protocol. The air froze for a second. In the ER, 10 seconds can last an entire winter. Then Dr. Morrison stepped in, adrenaline sharp as a blade. What's going on? I need you to look at his right hand, I said, flashlight flicking over the boy's eyes. And his orbital rim. Morrison's gaze narrowed. Run ammonia now. Prepare mannitol. Bring the protocol here. 10 minutes later, the red numbers flashed like a bell toll, ammonia 4 times normal. The room moved like a well-rehearsed symphony, only this time the rhythm was right. The seizures softened into tremors, then into quiet, then into peace. The monitor's scream faded into the steady beat of survival. I released the rail of the gurney, knees weakening just for a second. The boy was still small, still fragile, but the door to life had opened again. And then another door opened. 6 men in black suits cut through the crowd of lab coats. In their center stood a tall man, broad-shouldered, hair dark, with a few silver threads at his temples. His tailored suit a statement in itself. His eyes swept the room, missing nothing, not even me. Where's my son? His voice was low, rough-edged, but carried weight. The glances exchanged around us cracked like static. His name I'd hear later, whispered over and over like a rumor. Owen Parker. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, trying to block him. Sir, this area is restricted. Where's Leo? He didn't look at him. His gaze cut straight through me to where the boy now lay still. His eyes paused exactly at my chest, reading the stitched name and more. Years in the ER had taught me to recognize danger. But what flared in his eyes wasn't anger. It was fear, raw and unguarded. The fear of a man who'd learned to hide everything except this. The boy is stabilizing, I said evenly. We're monitoring closely. You can stand over there, just don't touch the lines. His men tensed. Hospital security mirrored them. The air stretched tight, ready to snap. Dr. Harris blurted, voice strained. She overstepped protocol. She saved your patient, Dr. Morrison interrupted, voice sharp. And all of us from a fatal error. Owen looked at me again. His eyes measured fast, precise, the way a businessman reads a balance sheet. Then they softened. He gave a single nod, short final like a period. Thank you. He didn't ask my name, but the way he said thank you felt like a promise. When the black suits disappeared behind the door, the ER exhaled. The hum of ventilators and ticking monitors returned. I straightened the boy's sheet. Leo? I thought Leo Parker, and pressed my forehead to my wrist to stop the tremor. More Dr. Harris called, voice lower now. I looked up. You're lucky. I smiled, not bitter. He's lucky. 3 days later, I sat before the disciplinary board. The same old smell of coffee and paper. The same words, insubordination hierarchy hospital image. I didn't diagnose, I said, palm resting on my uniform where my flashlight always clipped. I observed. I presented the data. The decision was the doctor's. But you made them change it. A board member adjusted his glasses. Because it was the right one. My tone stayed soft but solid. We danced that dance for an hour, a ballerina, and a chair neither willing to give way. When they said, "We'll review," I stood to leave. And the door opened, he was there. No black suits this time. Just a man in a dark coat holding a paper coffee cup, eyes steady instead of cold. "Natalie Moore," he said my name for the first time as if he'd practiced. "I'd like to talk." "With hospital counsel, I assume," I said. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "No. With me." We walked down the hallway overlooking Harrison Avenue. Snow clung to the corners like unfinished sentences. He handed me a thin envelope. "The remainder of your mother's hospital bills." I froze. "How did you—" "You're not the only one who notices details." His gaze flicked to the silver bracelet on my wrist, my mother's heirloom, which I twisted whenever anxious. "I'm not buying gratitude, just repaying part of what you gave my son." I opened the envelope, not just a check, but an old patient card from a small suburban hospital in Quincy, handwritten in blue ink. "Moore consult 2 years ago. The doctor's signature was familiar." "Where did you get this?" My pulse skipped. "From a file I paid to see." His words were plain unflinching. "I don't like surprises, Natalie. But you are the right kind of surprise." I steadied my breath. "If this is the beginning of a proposal, let me guess you want me as Leo's private nurse." 6 months. Full medical autonomy. He said it like he'd rehearsed it from my own thoughts. "Your safety and your mother's guaranteed by me." I met his eyes. "Who are you besides Parker Shipping and your army of suits?" He shifted his stance, hands in his coat pockets. A father who almost lost his child. It sounded true, but not complete. Some men learn perfect answers just to end questions. I'd met their kind in hospital hearings, in dead offices, and boardrooms. Perfection is just frosted glass. "I need time." 1 week, he replied. "I'll leave my personal number. Leo goes home tomorrow. He trusts you." His voice softened at those last 2 words, and something in his command hardened edges gave way. 1 week, I nodded. He turned to leave, then paused. "The lullaby you sang to my son that first night, where did you learn it?" I blinked. "From my grandmother. She was Italian. An old Nina Nana, I'm not even sure I pronounce it right." Owen hesitated. "Juliana Leo's mother sang it too." Same melody. He didn't look at me when he said it, just down at the street where snow melted into water. Maybe the same song. I didn't have time to ask how he knew I'd sung. Was there a mic in the ICU, or was he standing outside the door because a nurse ran in calling me back? Duty never waited for explanations. That night, I returned to my small apartment in South End. My mother was asleep. Her soft breathing behind the wooden door calmed me. I sat at the desk, yellow light pooling on the envelope Owen had given me. The check felt like a lifeline, but the old patient card froze my hand. The logo read, Quincy Pines Hospital, signed by S. Chen. Underlined pediatric consult suspected R, the R. Long unfinished, as if the writer had second-guessed themselves. I remembered that afternoon I'd suggested an ammonia test for a little girl, but the attending called it nonsense and closed the chart. She died that night. My guilt had never left. On the back of the card, almost invisible pencil marks. If someone ever reads this file, know this. Someone knew the truth, but couldn't speak it. I stood abruptly. Dr. Sarah Chen, that name had drifted through several cases, several lives, including Owen Parker's. The press once hinted at a secret operation for a powerful man, 2 years ago anonymous surgeon unnamed hospital. I'd never connected the dots, not until the symbol therefore gleamed faintly under the lamp. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 10:00 a.m., Eastgate Public Garden. 5 minutes only. OP? I typed. I haven't decided, then stopped halfway. Why would a billionaire use a logician's symbol? Why include a classified hospital file with a check? Why ask about a lullaby? Questions shimmered like fish beneath the surface. The closer I reached, the deeper they sank. Before turning off the light, I passed my mother's door. Nat, she murmured. I'm here, Mom. Everything's fine. A peaceful silence. Then, half asleep, she whispered. That lullaby, don't sing it for strangers? It binds people. Binds them, I asked. Yes, when you sing it, they stay. Like your grandmother bound your father, like I bound you. Maybe one day you'll bind the right one. She chuckled softly, the sound warm as an old blanket. Sleep, sweetheart. I stood long in the dark. In my mind, Leo slept beneath sterile lights. Owen stood in a hallway, coffee cup in hand, eyes fixed on the ICU window. The symbol hung between us like 3 dots connecting fate. Tomorrow at the public garden, there would be wet benches, ducks gliding on misty water, and a man from the shadows asking for 5 minutes. 5 minutes that might change 6 months or 6 years. I didn't know. I only knew I wouldn't sleep tonight. And if you want to follow me to that 5-minute meeting where every answer may begin, read part 2. Let's see whether the lullaby that binds truly binds a heart or merely its wounds. Boston was colder than usual this morning. On the lake in the public garden, a thin veil of mist drifted low, like the breath of a dream not yet dissolved. I sat on a white-painted wooden bench, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee for warmth. Nearly 8:30. An hour and a half to go until the meeting. I'd tried to convince myself I wouldn't attend. And yet here I was. What makes a woman leave her bed in midwinter, walk across a park, just to meet a man she still doesn't truly know? Maybe curiosity. Or worse, the feeling that I owe someone an explanation. The wind carried the smell of coffee from the little shop across the street, blending with the scent of old snow. I looked around a few children tossing bread to the ducks, an elderly man pushing a walker along the path. Boston moved to its usual rhythm, only I seemed to be standing outside of it. 9:45. I was about to leave when he appeared. No entourage in suits like at the hospital. Just him in a black overcoat and a gray scarf. Sunlight filtering through the mist silvered the hair at his temples. As he walked, he pulled off his gloves, a simple motion that still made my heart stutter half a beat. Natalie. He said my name, his voice low but gentler than before. I turned. You're early. Not in the habit of keeping a woman waiting. He sat beside me, leaving just enough space that our breaths wouldn't touch. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke, only the wind rustling through the bare trees. I broke the silence first. I'm guessing this isn't just coffee. He tilted his head. No, it's about Leo. My chest tightened on instinct. How is he stable? But... He paused, eyes on the water. Leo has a hereditary metabolic disorder. What you caught that night wasn't just a temporary crisis. It can recur at any time. I said nothing. The sounds around me blurred until only his voice remained steady, low, and cool. His doctors believe he needs someone with clinical expertise who understands his condition and how his body responds. Not just to monitor him to live with it, someone who can see what others overlook. I understood what he was saying. You want to hire me? I do, but not only that. He turned, meeting my eyes without flinching. I want you to be his protector. Full authority over his care, treatment, and medical decisions. You can walk away at any time if you feel unsafe. I let out a small laugh. It sounds like I'm signing on with an intelligence agency not caring for a 5-year-old. The corner of his mouth lifted, as if surprised I still had a sense of humor. It's not all that different. The wind picked up. He set a small envelope on the bench between us. Contract terms salary. Read it and give me an answer within 3 days. I looked at the envelope without touching it. And if I say no? He didn't answer right away. Just gave me a look deep enough to make it plain. Owen Parker wasn't used to hearing no. Why me, Owen? He lifted his head. In those dark eyes was something both weary and resolute. Because you're not afraid to be wrong, and you're willing to pay the price to be right. A faint shiver ran through me. We sat quietly for a while. On the lake, a single duck drifted away from the flock, leaving a small wake that slowly faded. I looked you up, I said softly. Parker Shipping, billions in revenue ties across Europe and South America. But there are rumors you're involved in things outside the law. He didn't react. Rumors usually exist for a reason. And is that reason true? It depends, he said without defensiveness. What do you want to believe? I studied him, searching for a hint of evasion. Instead, I found a weariness he couldn't quite hide, the look of someone who'd lived too long in a world where every answer is a hedge. I don't know, I admitted. I only know Leo is a sweet kid. And I owe him a chance to grow up. Owen nodded once. That's enough. He stood. I rose with him. He offered his hand big warm, and I noticed a small round scar on his wrist, like an old cigarette burn. Thank you for coming, Natalie. He paused, then added more quietly. Thank you for believing. I pulled my hand back. I'm not sure I believe you. Then believe the boy first. He walked off tall among the bare trees, and I sat again staring at the envelope on the bench. 3 days, he'd said, but when I opened it, I knew a few hours would force my decision. That afternoon, I went to the hospital to submit a leave request. The head nurse studied me as if she could read what I wasn't saying. 3 months, Natalie. Do you realize what that means for your promotion file? I do. But there's a patient who needs me more. I didn't mention that the patient was the son of a man who could silence an entire medical board with a single look. By the time I left the office, it had started to snow. I stopped under the awning and reopened Owen's envelope. The paperwork was precise, a 6-month contract pay, 10 times my current income. But it was the final line that made me freeze worksite Parker Estate on Lake Waverly outside New York. Private room adjacent to the patients, full authority over emergency medical decisions, absolute safety guaranteed. Below it, his signature Owen R. Parker, slanted, angular, cold, and elegant. I folded the papers and slipped them into my pocket, looking up into the falling snow. Part of me wanted to run. Another part wanted to see what absolute safety means to a man like him. That evening, I made coffee for my mother. She sat in the living room knitting, her eyes blurred behind reading glasses. "You're getting a few months off," she asked, cheerful, as if it were good news. "Yes, I've been invited to work privately for a special case." "Rich patient?" I laughed. So rich, I'm not sure what to call it. She nodded, then said suddenly, as if remembering, "Be careful. People with too much money don't always need a reason to control others." I stayed quiet. Her words fell into the room between the click of knitting needles true and a little late. Back in my room, I checked my phone. A message from him sent at 9:43 p.m. "A car will pick you up in front of Mercy General on Monday 8:00 a.m. Don't bring too much luggage. OP." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Monday morning. 2 days. The next morning, I stopped by the hospital one last time. Leo was still in special care, but awake now. Propped against pillows, he was doodling with crayons. When I stepped in, his big dark eyes lit up. "Miss Natalie?" I smiled, taking the chair by his bed. "Hey, little man, how do you feel today?" "You know what Papa says you're the best? Papa says without you, I would have slept forever." I froze. He said that. "Uh-huh. But Papa hardly ever smiles. I think Papa only smiles when my drawings are ugly." I laughed and ruffled his hair. "Then make a lot of ugly drawings so he'll smile more." Leo held up his paper, a messy but recognizable 3 figures, standing before a big house. A tall man, a child, and a long-haired woman holding the child's hand. "You know," he whispered, "that's you." My heart tightened. "And that house?" "My house. Papa says it's too big, but I think it's cold. If you were there, it would be warmer." I glanced out through the clear glass. On the floor below, a man stood looking up, gray overcoat, tall frame face turned toward this window. Owen Parker. We didn't wave, just a look meeting through thick glass and thin snow. And in that moment, I knew every exit had closed. As I left, Leo called after me, "Miss Natalie, if I dream about the song you sang, does that mean you're still here with me?" I smiled, though my eyes stung. "If you can still hear that song, then I'm not far, Leo." The door eased shut. I heard my heartbeat merge with the monitors inside. In the hallway, Owen was still waiting. He said nothing, only gave a small nod, a greeting, and a kind of confirmation. That Monday, my life would step into a different world. A world of high walls, unasked questions, and a man both dangerous and capable of throwing my heart off its rhythm with 2 simple words. "Thank you." Only this time in his eyes I could feel it clearly. What he wanted to thank me for went far beyond saving his son. The road out of downtown Boston stretched through bare forests and small towns tucked into the mist. The black car rode so smoothly I could hear the engine only as a low, steady breath. Up front, the driver Elias said, little glancing at the rearview mirror now and then to confirm I was still there, a quiet passenger with a small suitcase, and eyes that couldn't quite hide their worry. When the sign for Waverly Lake surfaced out of the haze, I realized nearly 5 hours had passed. The lake lay wide like a massive gray mirror, reflecting winter's sorrowful sky. On the far shore, old roofs peeked through. On this side, a stone path led to a private property, ringed by black iron fencing, and towering maples so tall they seemed to swallow the light. Elias stopped at the gate and spoke softly into the mirror. "Parker Estate, you'll be met from here." The gate swung open without a sound, as if it had been waiting. A middle-aged woman in a gray uniform stepped out, posture-straight hair in a neat bun, a look warm enough not to be cold. "Welcome, Miss Moore. I'm Mrs. Green, the housekeeper. Mr. Parker asked me to give you a tour." I nodded and followed her along the damp stone path. Each footfall echoed lightly into the still air. The manor emerged behind the trees, pale stone walls, large windows curtained in white, and a black-tiled roof veiled with dew. It didn't look like a home so much as a quiet fortress standing in nature, yet standing apart from the world. "Mr. Parker and young Leo live here most of the year," Mrs. Green said in her even tone. "The east wing is for daily living. The west wing has a medical suite. You'll be on the 2nd floor next to the boys' room. If you need anything, use the intercom." "Is there a large household staff?" I asked. "Not large. Mr. Parker prefers quiet. Just myself, a chef, 2 security officers, and now you." She paused at the marble steps and turned to me. One reminder after 8 p.m., the West Wing is locked. No one enters without permission. I dipped my head slightly. Why? She answered with the faintest smile. For safety, Miss Moore. My room sat at the end of the second-floor corridor, looking straight out over the lake. Everything was so refined, it was almost cold white curtains, pale wood wardrobe, a bed dressed in beige linen, and the faint scent of cedar. On the desk lay a small envelope with a handwritten line, "Welcome, Natalie." Inside was a short note unsigned. Leo wakes at 8:30 a.m. He likes to be read to before bed. OP. I held the note and read it twice. The lines were concise, even restrained, and yet there was something beneath them. A man always in control, always calculating letting emotion show only through instructions for his son's care. I took the chair by the window, watching Lake Waverly turn the color of ash. Wild ducks skimmed the surface, leaving ripples that faded into the stillness. I had thought I was stepping into a job like any other, but this place felt different. Not only for the quiet, but for the quiet on purpose. I saw Leo again the next morning. He was in a small study, a wooden robot model, and picture books spread before him. When I entered, he looked up, his dark eyes lighting with a familiar, eager spark. "Miss Natalie," he chirped, tossing down his crayon and running into my arms. I laughed, ruffling his hair. "You've grown already." "Feeling better I am. Papa says it's because of you." "Where's your papa?" I asked. "In his office." Leo lowered his voice, confiding Papa doesn't like being disturbed. "But if you read a story, Papa stands outside the door and listens." I blinked. "Are you sure?" "Sure." He nodded vigorously. "I've seen his shadow lots of times." The child's simple words sent a tremor through me. I remembered my mother's warning, the lullaby binds people. Could it be that afternoon, I took Leo for a walk in the garden behind the house. It was as large as a small parkstone paths, a fountain at the center, trellised roses climbing all the way to the second floor. Patches of snow clung to the branches, glittering in the dim sun. Guess what Leo said, lilting with chatter? My mom used to plant flowers here, but after she died, Papa wouldn't let anyone touch them. Only the grass. I crouched and brushed a dried rose petal with my finger. "Do you miss her?" He was quiet for a beat, then nodded. "I don't remember her face much, but I remember her voice. It sounds like yours." A breeze lifted, carrying the fragrance of dry flowers and something indefinable that tightened my chest. Footsteps sounded at a distance, measured unhurried. When I turned, Owen Parker was coming down the stone path, phone in hand, tall and straight, his gaze so sharp the air itself seemed to hush. He nodded in greeting, then crouched beside Leo. "Have you been good today?" "I finished my robot drawing." Papa Leo beamed, waving the paper. Owen set a hand on his son's shoulder, and for a moment, something in his eyes softened. I stood aside, watching how he spoke to the boy. Few words, but his eyes carried more than language could say. A father who had lost the most precious thing and was relearning how to love. When Leo ran toward the house to retrieve a forgotten toy, Owen rose, his gaze touching mine. "He's much better." "I'm just doing my job," I said. "No, you're doing more." He hesitated, then said quietly, "I'm not good at thank yous, but I'm grateful." "You don't owe me gratitude," I replied. "I just want Leo to live like any ordinary child." He smiled, a rare thing, and enough to make me forget the cold wind. Ordinary is the most expensive luxury in my world, Natalie. That night, I read to Leo before bed. He curled under the covers, listening closely, and by the last page, he was asleep, breathing evenly. I stood, tucked him in, and slipped into the hallway. The lights were low. The air smelled faintly of peppermint tea. My footsteps sounded soft on the wood floor. At the far end, a door glowed Owen's study. I hesitated, then turned away. His voice reached me, low and husky, "Natalie." I stopped. He stood in the doorway without a jacket, just a white shirt, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The lamplight behind him lit the sharp planes of his face. "Come in," he said. Calm, as if he'd known I would pause here. The room was large, paneled in dark wood windows looking over the lake. On the desk, a stack of files, several family photos, and one frame turned face down. "I just heard you sing," he said, eyes on the window. "That song." He drew a breath. "Juliana sang it every night." I nodded lightly. "Leo told me. The boy remembers his mother by the song. As for me, by silence." He set the glass down and faced me. "Aren't you afraid of this place? Should I be, maybe? The Parker estate isn't just a house. It's a wall between me and the world. Sometimes those walls swallow the people who enter." My mouth tightened. "Is that a warning?" He gave a brief smile tinged with sadness and self-mockery. "Maybe I don't want you to leave." The room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, snow had started to fall, each flake catching the glow from inside. I could hear my heartbeat and couldn't say whether it was fear or something else. Owen stepped closer, only enough that I could see the warm light mirrored in his eyes. If you ever see something strange, don't ask. Just trust me. Trust you, I echoed. You say that like you're not sure you deserve it. He dipped his head voice so low it felt like a confession. Because I don't. In that moment, I understood beneath the cool control and power was a man trying to hold on to what was left a son, and perhaps a chance to make amends. He moved out onto the balcony, gazing at the lake where a dim moon smeared itself across the water. Tomorrow I have to go to New York for 2 days. Stay here with Leo. If anything at all seems off, call me directly, no one else. What counts as off? He turned back, his look fathomless. You'll know it when you see it. Then he left the door left ajar and the sound of steady snowfall on the roof. I stood there a long time staring at the face-down photo. Beneath the glass, a faint reflection revealed a blonde woman cradling a little boy with Owen beside them smiling. A smile I had never seen on him in life. The light dimmed. In the hush of the Lake Waverly estate, I realized it wasn't the house that was frightening. It was what hadn't been said waiting to be uncovered. And that night, for the first time, I heard footsteps soft, almost weightless down the west corridor where the doors were supposed to be locked. Nights at Waverly always smelled of snow, and the wind brushed the roof like someone whispering. I woke in the middle of the night, unsure whether a dream or a noise had roused me. The clock read 2:17 a.m. Everything around me was unnervingly still until I heard it again, the faintest footsteps drawn out, then stopping abruptly somewhere down the West Wing corridor. I sat up and listened. Wind, or someone moving after midnight in a section that was supposed to be locked. Reason told me to lie back down, but something else urged me into the hall. I slipped on a cardigan, slid into soft slippers, and opened the door. The corridor was empty, weak amber light pooling over old framed paintings. The cold made my breath fog like smoke. The sound came again, clearer this time, from the far end where a small iron door led to the West Wing. I moved slowly, keeping my breathing steady. Up close, I saw the lock was intact, yet the door was ajar by a narrow crack. I eased it open. Inside, a thin clinical light spilled from one room, likely the medical suite. Metal gleamed. Disinfectant hung in the air, threaded with a faint lavender scent. On the table sat a porcelain cup still steaming. And an open file. I stepped closer to look when another set of footsteps sounded firmer and decisive. Instinct sent me behind a nearby curtain. The door opened. A tall man in a black coat entered. The light caught his face, Owen Parker. He didn't look around, as if he knew someone was there but chose not to care. He set another stack of papers on the table, pulled off his gloves, then stared into the wall mirror. The reflection in the glass wasn't the Owen I'd come to know, neither cold nor contained. It was empty. Juliana, he whispered, voice so low it was almost breath. I kept my word. I'm still here. A shiver ran down my spine. Juliana, his wife, gone. He stood there a moment, then opened a drawer and took out an old envelope. He slid a photograph free, and his eyes softened. If only you could have seen Leo today. His voice caught, not the sound of a powerful man, but of someone who'd lost everything. The feeling that rose in me was hard to name, something like sorrow or mercy. When he turned, I slipped back into the corridor, my heart pounding. The door closed behind him, quiet as if nothing had happened. But from that night on, I knew the wall separating the two wings wasn't just a rule. It was where Owen hid the things he wouldn't let anyone touch. Morning lit Waverly in rare brightness. Snow thawed, the lake reflected a pale gray sky. I was making coffee in the kitchen when Mrs. Green laid out breakfast. Did you sleep well? She asked, her eyes flicking over me in quick appraisal. I'm getting used to the wind, I said. Her smile was thin. The wind, is it? People hear other things here. I paused. What do you mean? Nothing. She poured tea. Old houses keep their own memories. Best not to mind them. But there was nothing casual in her eyes when she said it. Around noon, Owen returned from New York. I watched from a second-floor window as his car rolled into the drive. He stepped out collar open at the throat, carrying the exhaustion of travel and the posture of someone who never surrendered control. I thought to step away, but he looked up as if he'd felt my gaze. Our eyes met for a second, enough for me to see the deep fatigue beneath his reserve. That evening, he invited me to dinner with him and Leo. We ate beneath a chandelier in a large room with a white-clothed table. Leo sat between us with a glass of milk, chattering about the lake. I saw two swans, Papa. They're always together. Owen's smile was slight rare. Because they choose each other for life. Leo's eyes widened. Like Papa and Mama? The room tightened. Owen set down his wine, his voice dropping low. Like that, I glanced at him and found his gaze on me and speaking, but heavy enough that I couldn't look away. After dinner, Leo was taken up to bed. I was about to leave the dining room when Owen said, Natalie. He stood by the fireplace, the flames casting honeyed light across his face. Are you comfortable here? I am. It's just very quiet. You don't like quiet, I do, but here, it's different. It feels like quiet on purpose. He was silent a beat, eyes drifting. It is. I built it so the world couldn't find Leo. Or me. Why hide Owen? He looked at me with the hint of a smile. You don't want to know. I gave a dry laugh. Saying that only makes people want to know. And once they do, they usually wish they could forget. Silence settled between us. The crackle of logs, the far tick of a clock. In that light, he seemed both near and distant, a man speaking truth, while hiding an entire world behind his eyes. I once promised to protect 2 people, he said softly. I failed one. I won't lose the other. Me, I asked. He didn't answer, only smiled faintly, then stepped closer. The space between us narrowed until I could hear his breath. You know, Natalie, from the moment you walked into that ER, nothing in me has been still. I exhaled, steadying myself. You're confusing gratitude with something else. Maybe. His gaze gentled. But even if it's a confusion, I want to keep it. He turned away then, as if from himself. I saw his hand tighten around the glass knuckles taut. I've lost too many things, he murmured. Maybe I'm holding on to anything that still makes me feel alive. I couldn't answer. Part of me wanted to step back. Another part wanted to step forward toward the shadow he carried. You still keep her photo in the West Wing, I said before I could stop myself. Juliana. Owen turned, his eyes darkening. You were there. I went still. I heard something. I only checked. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he came closer and stopped a pace away. If it were anyone else, I wouldn't forgive it. But you. His voice lowered, almost tender. I can't seem to be angry with you. Firelight caught in his eyes, amber flaring into gold like flame. I drew a step back, and he only said, Don't be afraid of me. I'm not... I answered soft, but true. I just don't know where I'm standing. Between 2 worlds, he said. Mine and the one you think you can leave whenever you want. His gaze held mine, deep quiet. Then he added, But if you stay long enough, you'll see the 2 aren't so different. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went out to the balcony and looked over the lake. Moonlight glittered on the water, and far off I saw a pin of light as if from a window in the West Wing. I raised a hand to shade my eyes. A figure passed by. Not Owen smaller thinner. A housekeeper on rounds. Or something else. Wind moved through the maples, carrying a sound so faint it might have been imagined singing. A melody I knew so well it hurt the Italian lullaby. I stood motionless, heart pounding. The same song I'd sung for Leo. The song Owen said Juliana used to sing. But tonight, Juliana is dead, and the lullaby was rising from behind a door that was supposed to be locked. In Waverly's midnight hush, I understood some things don't belong to the past because they never left this place at all. 3 days later, I officially began working in the East Wing of the Parker estate. The work moved so quietly and precisely that the silence itself started to unnerve me. The people I treated never gave real names. They were called only by initials JLK. Most had gunshot wounds or deep lacerations sewn shut with care injuries that would never appear in any legal medical record. At first, they watched me with suspicion, then accepted me in silence, as if I were a required part of this world. Owen seldom appeared. He sent brief messages through Vincent, his right hand she's learning to look into the dark without losing the light. I couldn't tell whether that was praise or a warning. On the 3rd night, as I was checking the medicine cabinet, Vincent walked in. Tall, sharp-featured gray eyes, unreadable. Mr. Parker invites you to the gala tonight, he said evenly. Gala. I looked up, thinking I'd misheard. Yes, a charity event. You're the guest of honor. He paused. He wants you to accompany him. I froze. I don't have anything to wear. Vincent's thin smile said he'd expected that. Fitting room upstairs. Everything is prepared. The car pulled away from Waverly at 7 p.m. Boston glittered under winter lights, streets gleaming after rain. I sat in the back seat in a black silk dress falling to my ankles, the neckline just open enough to make me feel unlike myself. When the door opened, I saw the hotel, a vast building of glass light rippling over it like waves. Hundreds in expensive evening wear streamed through the lobby laughter, and the clink of crystal blending into the perfect soundtrack for their world, one I had never belonged to. Owen came to my side. Black suit, ash gray tie. The lights carved his features so sharply people turned to look. He held out his hand, voice low and steady. Don't look at them. Look at me. I set my hand in his, warm, steady, and dangerous. He led me through the crowd and stopped at the bar. Violins sang fine and seductive. The men who shook his hand were faces I'd seen in the business pages, bankers, politicians, investors. They smiled, they spoke, they addressed him as Mr. Parker, with a respect salted by fear. One of them, silver hair. Stiff Smile glanced at me and joked. Didn't expect you to bring a companion to a place like this, Mr. Parker. Owen turned slightly. She's not a companion. She saved my son's life." For a beat, the table went silent. The man's mouth thinned. He forced a smile and raised his glass. "All the more reason for my respect, Miss Moore," I answered with a polite small smile. But in Owen's eyes, I caught a flash, not anger, but caution. Around 9, the gala swelled to its peak. Glass chandeliers broke into 100 trembling lights, reflections dancing over wine and jewelry. I slipped onto a balcony to breathe away from the glitter. Owen joined me a few minutes later, bringing his familiar warm resin scent. "Not fond of parties? Just not used to them." He leaned on the rail eyes on the city. "They think I enjoy this. I hate noise. People come to see who lies best." I gave a quiet laugh. "And you?" "What do you think I am?" I glanced over. "The kind who doesn't need to lie only to keep quiet." He smiled that rare smile that softened the lights in his eyes. "Maybe you understand me better than I thought." Silence stretched. Boston glowed below us, traffic pulsing like the veins of a giant body. A cool gust threaded my hair. He tipped closer to adjust the strap on my shoulder, too gentle, too deft, and my heart missed a beat. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. "Making sure you're warm." "A beat, and making sure everyone knows who you're with." I turned to him. "Why is that important?" He didn't answer at once. He looked into the distance, voice dropping. "Because someone is testing where I'm weak." Before I could ask, he took my hand and drew me back into the hall. The smile returned to his lips, smooth, as if the last minute had never happened. By 11, guests were drifting out. Owen remained in a rear conference room with a few men, voices low. I caught Scrap's shipping transfer new contract Italian partner. Vincent appeared at my side, gaze like steel. "You should wait in the car. Mr. Parker will follow." I nodded and stepped into the corridor. Rounding a corner, I stopped. A different voice drifted from a half-open door, not Owen's. "You're playing a dangerous game, Owen. Bringing that nurse into the light is a mistake." Owen's reply, low and contained, "I didn't bring her into the light. I let them see someone who'll stand beside me without fear. Does she know she's in a fire ant nest? She's braver than all of them." A pause, then a dry laugh. "Careful, Owen. Brave and foolish are separated by a thread." I left before I heard the rest. Streets were quiet on the drive back. Lights skated over the car window like streaks running the wrong way. I couldn't name what surged through me, fear or something more complicated. Snow had started when we reached Waverly. Owen wasn't back yet. I went upstairs to check on Leo sleeping peacefully, then paused at the glass wall facing the lake. Under a thin moon, the water lay still, save for a single blinking point, far off a light from the west wing. For the first time, I walked to the door joining the wings. The lock felt ice cold under my fingers. As I began to pull away, there was a soft click. The door opened on its own. I froze, heart hammering. Darkness inside. A cold draft flowed out, carrying lavender laced with antiseptic. I didn't step in, stood on the threshold, and listened to something very faint. Singing. A woman's voice, soft and far, humming the exact lullaby I'd used for Leo. I held my breath. Through the crack, I saw a figure, tall, slender, long hair, a white nightgown. Not Owen, not Mrs. Green, and certainly not a hallucination. The figure turned very slowly. I caught the briefest gleam in her eyes, and then everything went dark. The door closed as if it had never opened. I stood in the corridor, heart-racing, breath caught in my throat. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. Inside, the lavender lingered like a memory refusing to leave. And I began to understand that what Owen called the dark wasn't only in his past. It was alive, breathing, and staring straight at me from inside this very house. The next morning, Waverly was so peaceful, I began to doubt my own ears. The lake lay clear as glass, the silvery gray sky reflected in every window pane. Nothing suggested that the night before I'd heard singing or seen a figure in the west wing, except for the lingering scent of lavender on my sleeve. I went down to the kitchen, trying to act normal. Mrs. Green was setting breakfast, her expression as usual, composed, polite, but there was something behind her eyes I couldn't read. "Did you sleep well, Ms. Moore?" she asked in her calm voice. "Better than I expected?" I took a sip of coffee, keeping my tone steady, though I did hear something strange from the west wing. Her hand paused mid-air, holding a spoon. "There's no one in the west wing, you know that." "Then who unlocked the door?" She looked up and something flickered in her eyes. Worry or warning? I couldn't tell. "That door doesn't open, ever." "Perhaps you were dreaming." I wanted to argue, but footsteps sounded behind me. Owen appeared, sleeves rolled, hair still damp from the shower. He looked like a man untouched by sleeplessness, and in his eyes was a faint, worn fatigue. "Good morning," he nodded at me. "Did you rest well?" I hesitated, then said, "Well enough, although I think I heard someone singing." He froze for half a heartbeat, his hand pausing on the coffee cup, and singing, "Yes, from the west wing." The kitchen went still. Mrs. Green didn't move. Owen simply looked at me so long that I could almost hear the clock ticking through the silence. Then he said softly, "It might have been the wind. Lake Waverly carries sound farther than you'd think, but I—" He cut me off with a smile, neither cold nor warm. "If you hear it again, call me. I'll come." The way he said it, calm but final, left no room for further questions, as if he'd just placed a period at the end of my thoughts. By noon, I was outside with Leo. He tugged me toward the lakeshore, where the water mirrored the dull silver of the sky. The air was damp and cold. White birds flashed across the distance. "Papa said I mustn't go near the West Wing," Leo said, serious as a little old man. "He said there are things children shouldn't see." I narrowed my eyes. "Have you ever heard anything from there?" He bit his lip, then nodded slightly. "Once I heard Mama singing. But when I told Papa, he said I was dreaming. Papa doesn't like to talk about her." I sat beside him and took his small hand. "Some people, when they lose someone, are afraid to speak of it because if they do, the pain comes alive again." He looked up. "Are you afraid?" I smiled faintly. "I'm afraid of what I can't see clearly. But sometimes what's most frightening is what we try hardest to hide." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you think Mama's still here?" I didn't know how to answer, because last night I'd seen a figure my reason insisted couldn't exist. "Maybe sometimes the soul lingers where it once loved," I whispered. "And maybe this lake still keeps your mother's voice." Leo smiled, believing instantly, then tossed a pebble into the lake. It skipped 3 times before sinking. Watching the ripples fade, I felt something stir, like a secret waiting either to be revealed or buried forever. That evening, Owen came home late. I heard his car stop by the gate around 10. When he entered the hall, his coat was damp with rain, his eyes darker than usual. "I heard from Vincent you took Leo to the lake," he said. "Yes, he wanted some fresh air. It's cold there. You should keep him in the garden." His voice wasn't raised yet. There was an invisible weight of command that made me tense. I inhaled deeply and kept my tone calm. "Leo's stronger now, Owen. He needs to see the world, not just these walls." He studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly, more in resignation than disagreement. "You always speak as if you know what's best for my son. I just know what's best for a child who deserves to live, not merely exist." Owen stepped closer, closing the space between us. The scent of rain and pine from his coat filled the air, dizzying. His voice dropped low. "You have no idea what you're touching, Natalie." My pulse quickened. "Maybe not. But if it's something that frightens Leo, I want to know." His gaze darkened. "It's not Leo who's afraid. It's me." The air in the room seemed to freeze. I had never heard this man speak of fear, his own fear. He turned away, his voice rough, as if talking to himself. "I used to think I could keep everything safe by controlling it. But one day, I realized some things can't be locked behind steel." I said nothing. In the dim glow of the fire, his face looked carved with exhaustion, yet there was a vulnerability I had never seen before. That night, I woke again. The wind was stronger, the windows rattled softly, and then the song returned clearer than ever. Not a dream, impossible to mistake. It came from the West Wing, thin and pure as mist. "Nina Nana, dormi amore mio." I sat up, heart hammering. The door to the West Wing was still locked, yet the melody seeped through every seam, winding through the corridor like the breath of the past. I couldn't bear it. I walked toward it, hand trembling on the handle. Cold metal, still locked. But the singing didn't stop, it was almost calling me. "Juliana." The name slipped out before I could stop it. No answer. Only the wind and a draft so cold it made the lights flicker and die. I stepped back, ready to turn away, when the lights flared again, and Owen stood at the end of the hall. His shirt, half-buttoned hair, tousled eyes sharp as blades in the dark. "What are you doing here?" My throat tightened. I heard singing. From inside. He strode forward, swift and firm, blocking me from the door. "There's no one in there, Natalie. You're lying." He looked at me for a long moment, then closed his eyes briefly. "If I told you someone was, would you promise to forget?" I shook my head. He gave a humorless, weary smile. "I knew that." He lifted a finger to my lips, gentle but desperate. "Don't tell Leo, no matter what you see or hear. Don't." His voice was low, almost pleading. I stared at him. "Who's in there, Owen?" He was silent. His hand dropped from my lips to the lock, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond. "A part of the past I haven't buried." He opened the door, a narrow crack. Dim light spilled through, touching his face. Inside, I glimpsed an old medical room. On the bed, the outline of a woman lay still, long hair spread across the pillow. The lavender scent thickened, almost suffocating. Owen closed the door again and looked straight at me. "Now you understand." I stepped back, speechless, my heart pounding hard enough to hurt. He passed me, voice rough. "You've stepped into my part of the house, Natalie, and now you'll have to stay to keep it secret." When he was gone, I stood alone in the hallway, not sure whether what I felt was fear or pity. Only that tonight, Waverly was no longer a home. It was a prison of unforgiven memories, and I had become part of it. The morning after that night, sunlight poured through the window. I'd once thought the loveliest in Waverly, but today, it sent a chill down my spine. Inside me, the singing still echoed, splintered into fragile notes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw long hair spilling over a white pillow and the still hand of the woman in the locked room. Mrs. Green knocked at 8. She carried a tray of peppermint tea, her voice unnervingly composed. "Mr. Parker asked me to remind you to rest today. You don't need to see patients." I took the tray with a thin smile, because I saw what I shouldn't have seen. Mrs. Green paused, then set the teapot down. Something flickered in her eyes, almost pity. "The more you know here, the harder it is to leave. How long have you been here long enough to know that in this house, loyalty matters more than truth?" I meant to ask more, but she'd already turned away. Back straight footsteps so light they made no sound. The door closed. Peppermint steam rose, blending with the faint lavender on my sleeve, the scent of secrets. At noon, Owen left the house. Vincent drove him, saying nothing. I stood on the second-floor balcony and watched the car disappear through the maples. When it was gone, a strange feeling rose in me. The quiet was no longer frightening. It was an opportunity. I went back to the sick room where Leo was stacking wooden blocks. "Miss Natalie, where did Papa go?" "Work, sweetheart. Papa's always working. I wish he knew I can draw Mama." I looked up. "You drew your mother." Leo nodded and held out a page. A woman in a white dress, long hair, standing by a window looking out at the lake. In the corner, in his wobbly pencil letters, "Mama is still here." My hand trembled. "Leo, who told you to write that?" He tilted his head, all innocent confusion. "No one. I just copied it. Yesterday, someone left that paper on my desk." I scanned the room. It was neat, untouched. But on the small study table, there really was a folded note, its edge damp as if kissed by night mist. I opened it. One line handwritten in black ink. "He never buried me." Cold swept through me. The script was soft, slanted, delicate, feminine. And familiar. I'd seen it before. In the West Wing's old medical files on an organ donor form, the signature Juliana R. Parker. That evening, I went to Owen's study. The desk lamp lit files, papers, and the only photograph still standing Juliana in a white dress holding Leo when he was small. I stayed there a long time until the back door clicked open. Vincent entered, eyes like ice. "Mr. Parker said no one is allowed in here. I only want to ask about Juliana." He arched a brow. "Juliana is dead." "I know. Then why keep the West Wing as if she were alive?" "And who did I see last night?" Vincent looked at me for a moment, then gave a half smile that was half contempt. "Mr. Parker has his reasons. You only need to do your job." "So it's true. Someone is in there." He said nothing. "It's her." "Isn't it?" I whispered, voice unsteady. "Juliana is still alive." Vincent stepped closer, speaking so softly it was almost inaudible. "If you want to leave here someday, pretend you don't know anything." I froze. Before I could ask more, he was gone, the door closing gently like a period at the end of a sentence. Night. Wind off the lake stirred the curtains. I couldn't sleep. I sat at the desk, staring at the note Juliana had left. The ink had dried, but something about it still glinted like salt or tears. A soft knock. I started. When I opened the door, Leo stood there in his pajamas, clutching a stuffed bear. "Miss Natalie, I hear someone talking to me." I knelt to smooth his hair. "Where Leo?" "In my room. I heard Mama say, 'Don't be afraid.' Did you hear it too?" I drew a deep breath to steady him. "Maybe it was a dream." "No. She also said, 'Tell Miss Natalie to go to the lake.'" I went still. Leo's clear little voice was so true, I couldn't dismiss it as imagination. Now I asked. He nodded. "Before the sun comes up." I threw on a coat and carried Leo outside. Fog lay heavy, the moon hid behind clouds. The lake was a dark mirror, perfectly still. "Where Leo?" He pointed to the far end of the stone bank where an old maple leaned over the water. We walked to it. Beneath the tree, half buried in earth, lay a small box so old that moss glued its lid. I set Leo behind me and eased it open. Inside was a silver necklace, an old photo of Owen and Juliana, and a folded letter. The paper was yellowed. The lavender scent remained. My hands shook as I read in the dim moonlight. "If anyone finds this, know this. I did not die of illness. I died of silence. They will say Owen Parker was my husband, my love, but he was also the one who locked the last door while I was still breathing. He said it was to protect Leo. I believed him, until there was no breath left to believe." The letter slipped from my fingers. My hands were ice. Wind scraped the branches like a cry. Leo squeezed my hand, voice quavering. Miss Natalie, is Mama crying? I pulled him close, not daring to look back at the lake. Because through the fog, I'd glimpsed a woman's figure standing on the water. Long hair, flying white dress stirring. No song. Only silence, a silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. At dawn, Owen returned. He looked grim eyes, bruised with fatigue, voice rough. Vincent tells me you went to the lake at midnight. I met his gaze, my voice strangely calm. I heard Juliana. He stopped, his hand curling into a fist. Don't say her name. Because you know she didn't die, isn't that right? Owen stepped in, close eyes, gone bottomless, his voice dropping. You don't understand anything. Then, let me. He gave a bleak, misplaced smile. You want the truth? Natalie, truth isn't for people who want to save. I read her letter. The smile vanished. For a heartbeat, his face went pale. Then his eyes darkened, no longer the Owen I knew. You shouldn't have gone to the lake. Why? Because that's where you buried the wife you never let rest. He seized my shoulders, his voice low and trembling. Because that's where my guilt is buried. I went rigid. He released me and turned away. His words fell like breath. She died in my hands, Natalie. But not the way you think. Why he was silent a long time. When he faced me again, his eyes had the dullness of someone looking through me at his former self. She was ill. A rare psychiatric disorder that blurred dream and waking. She hurt herself, locked herself away, and one day she vanished from the bed. When we found her, it was too late. But the letter, Juliana wrote it in a break. She believed I wanted to kill her when all I was trying to do was save her. He gave a bitter half laugh, eyes cast down. That's the tragedy, when the person you love most believes you're the monster. I had no words. Everything in me shattered into 100 shards of doubt. Owen looked at me. Weak daylight from the window washed over his face, tired, honest, and heavy with pain. Now do you see why I kept that room? I can't bring myself to clear the lavender. It's the last thing of her that remains. He stepped closer, very slowly. Listen to me, Natalie. Don't let Juliana's ghost pull you under. I've lived in that pit long enough. But as he spoke, the letter's trembling line still rang in me. He locked the last door while I was still breathing. I looked at him, unsure whom to believe, the man standing before me, or the woman who still sang within these silent walls. And when Owen turned away, I knew life at the Parker estate had veered onto another path, where love and guilt are separated by a single breath. From that morning on, the Parker estate felt different. No one said a word yet. I sensed a change seeping through every corridor and every quiet glance from the staff. Owen still left for work each day, but his presence was no longer a solid wall, more like a man trying to keep something from collapsing. I tried not to mention the letter. That didn't mean I could forget. Every time I passed the West Wing, I felt someone watching me, a presence light as breath, real enough to raise a rash of gooseflesh. That night, rain came. I didn't sleep. Outside, the drops stitched the lake with 1,000 whispered voices. In my room, a small candle cast pale gold over the paper I kept hidden in the drawer, Juliana's letter. I'd meant to burn it. Strangely, I couldn't. Maybe I wanted to believe that inside those trembling lines, some part of her still longed to be heard. Near midnight, a knock sounded. Not hard, not urgent, 3 soft taps like wind touching wood. I opened the door. Owen stood there, soaked through hair, tousled collar open. Hall light washed over his face, exhausted and heavy. You're still awake. His voice was low and hoarse, almost melting into the rain. I was about to make tea. Pour me one. I brewed another cup of peppermint tea, set it before him. He didn't drink. He sat with his fingers laced, gaze far away as if looking into a space between us. I read Juliana's journals again, he said, voice low, a confession. Every word is a blade. Some nights I think if I died, maybe she would forgive me. I went still. Outside, wind lashed the glass. You don't have to carry a life sentence, I whispered. He gave a faint, slanting smile, too sorrowful to meet. The sin isn't her death, Natalie. It's that I kept living. A long silence. Then he looked up at me. Have you ever loved someone so much you wanted to keep them, even knowing it was wrong? I didn't answer at once. Maybe because I knew the question wasn't only for me. Love isn't possession, I said slowly. Sometimes we don't learn that until after we lose. His eyes touched mine, deep still, with a storm trapped inside. Beneath all that control, I saw a man punishing himself. He rose and went to the window, watching rain braid the lake. The day Juliana died, he said I was in the house. I didn't go in. She had locked the door. I knocked. No answer. By the time we broke it, he stopped. He didn't need to finish. His hand was shaking. A raindrop slid from his hair across his cheekbone, disappearing into a grief I couldn't touch. I stepped closer and set my hand on his shoulder. You can't save someone who's chosen to disappear. He turned slightly. Only a breath lay between us. I don't know if she chose it, or if I drove her to it. His voice broke, fading into the rain. When he bent toward me, his mouth came close enough that I caught the faint scent of mint on his breath. But he stopped as if an invisible wall stood between us. "You shouldn't stay here," he murmured, almost pleading. "This place only knows how to swallow good people." I shook my head. "No one can save you if you keep hiding inside your guilt." He studied me a long moment, then exhaled. "You're always right, and your rightness makes people want to come apart." He left. The door closed behind him, leaving rain and the cooling scent of peppermint tea. The next day, Leo spiked a fever. It hit out of nowhere and ran through the afternoon. I stayed with him, checking temps, swapping cool cloths, starting a light drip. Each time he drifted, he called Mama in a broken little voice, as if she were standing by the bed. By evening, when the fever broke, I found a slip of paper under his pillow. The same script, slanted, soft, delicate. "Don't let him do to you what he did to me." I sank into the chair, heartbeat skittering. Someone was trying to warn me. But who? A voice from the past, or someone living inside this house? Night. Waverly drowned in thick fog. The moon was so faint it barely showed the path. I moved down the long corridor toward the west wing. The door was still locked, but inside a dim light glowed through the crack. I stepped back, pulse quickening. Suddenly a hand closed around my wrist. I spun. "Owen, what are you doing here?" His voice was low and rough, not cold like before, laced with despair. I saw a light. "There is no light. You're lying. You think I want to hide things from you. I want to keep you safe. I don't need protection from the truth." He looked at me, eyes unsettled in the moonwash. "Truth doesn't save anyone, Natalie. It only costs what little you have left." He released my wrist, but didn't step away. His voice slid down like a thin blade. "Do you know why I chose you?" I shook my head. "Because your eyes are like Juliana's. When you saved Leo, I saw it. Those eyes made me believe I still had a chance." I froze. The words fell straight into my chest, warm and wounding. "You're saying I'm a replacement, no?" He moved one step closer, shaking his head. "You're the only thing that makes me forget I lost her." Wind stirred the curtains. The house seemed to breathe. I heard my heartbeat sync with rain knocking at the glass. "But you can't love me if she's still inside you," I said softly. He bent until his lips hovered at my forehead, not touching just close enough that his breath spilled warm against my skin. "I know." His voice thinned. "I just don't know how to stop." He turned away and I caught the faint tremor in his hand as he touched the wall, the spot where Juliana's photo hung. That night back in my room, sleep wouldn't come. Rain kept falling, and somewhere deep in the house, the singing rose again, gentler, nearer than ever. "Nina nana. Dormi amor mio." I stepped into the hall. In the dim light, I saw the west wing door ajar, warm gold spilling out. Inside, someone stood beside the bed. Not Owen. Not a shadow of the night. A living woman, long hair, white dress. She turned. Sea blue eyes widened, holding my reflection. Shock, fear, and the certainty that I was looking at someone who was supposed to be dead. Juliana Parker smiled the slightest breeze through a window frame. He never let me leave. And before I could speak, the door eased shut, soft as breath, leaving an echo I could not erase. I stood frozen, listening to footsteps fade into rain and wind. In that instant, I knew I wasn't here only to care for Leo. I was here to witness a truth even Owen didn't have the courage to face. The next morning, the Waverly estate felt as if it had woken from a heavy dream. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, but it couldn't chase the chill coiled inside the stone walls. I sat at the desk, hands still trembling, trying to write down everything I'd seen last night, as if putting it on paper would make it make sense. Juliana Parker, the woman said to be dead. The face identical to the photograph on Owen's desk. The woman I had seen with my own eyes. I no longer knew which reality I was living in. Only that every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing in that pale golden light lake, blue eyes shining like Waverly's water. Smiling at me and whispering, he never let me leave. In the morning, I didn't see Owen. Mrs. Green said he'd gone out early on personal business. Her voice was even, but the hand holding her teacup trembled. "You know, don't you?" I asked quietly. "Know what, Miss Moore? That Juliana is still alive." She was silent for a long time. Her tired, aging eyes settled on me like someone who had held a secret for too long. "Some people neither live nor die, Miss Moore. They exist in the form someone else chooses for them." The words were a thin thread leading me to the end of what I hadn't dared to imagine. At noon, while Leo napped, I slipped toward the west wing. The door was shut tight, but this time I wasn't afraid. I carried a small key I'd found in an old medical drawer. Perhaps Owen had forgotten it or left it on purpose. The lock yielded suspiciously soft. Inside, the air was cool and thick with lavender. Light from a narrow window cut through the dust. The hospital bed stood in the center empty. The woman I'd seen last night was gone. On the side table sat a jar of dried lavender, a leather-bound journal, and a silver comb engraved with 2 letters. JP. I opened the journal. The first pages were lined with soft, slanting script. He tells me I mustn't go outside. Because of my illness. Because the world is dangerous. But when I look through the window, I see only the lake and the swans. How can a lake kill anyone? Page 10. I hear my own singing in the walls. Perhaps I've been here so long my voice has turned into wind. The last page shook with each stroke, nearly illegible. If anyone finds this book, please take Leo away. Do not let him teach my child that love is possession. I closed the journal, heart pounding. Juliana hadn't died of illness, she had been kept. A faint sound behind me. I turned, my heart stopping. Owen stood in the doorway. Hall light fell across his shoulders. He looked both imposing and exhausted, as if he'd found me exactly where he knew I'd be. You shouldn't be here, he said, calm voice, darkened eyes. I need the truth, Owen. The truth will only make you hate me. Maybe, but I'd hate myself if I didn't ask. He stepped slowly into the room. Damp wood and lavender pressed together heavy enough to choke. I didn't kill Juliana, he said hoarsely, but I didn't save her either. Why? He looked toward the window. She suffered from paranoid delusions. She believed someone wanted to take Leo to split us apart. I tried to help, but the medicine wasn't enough. Then she began to fear me too. That night she ran with Leo to the lake. I got there in time. I saved our son, and she... He stopped. His fists clenched, shaking. She didn't die, but when they pulled her from the water, she wasn't Juliana anymore. She remembered nothing. Didn't speak. Didn't know anyone. The doctor said a quiet environment was best. I kept her here a shadow so Leo could believe his mother still existed, only... resting. And for you? I asked softly. His eyes met mine, raw with pain. For me, it's a sentence. The room went dead still. I could feel our heartbeats thudding into the same suffocating air. I don't believe she was insane, I said at last. No one writes like that unless they know they're being imprisoned. Owen's smile cracked like a fissure. You're seeing this with an outsider's eyes. I've lived here long enough to know sometimes the mad ones aren't the ones behind the lock. By afternoon, rain returned. Owen locked the west wing. He told no one. He only ordered Vincent to guard the door. I went back to Leo's room, my mind spiraling. When Leo woke, he tugged my sleeve and whispered, Miss Natalie, Papa cried. I froze. You saw, he nodded. Papa stood in the West Wing hall looking at the door. I thought he'd open it, but he just said, I'm sorry. He lifted his big dark eyes. Mama used to say, when Papa cries, the sky will rain. I pulled him close, my throat tight. Night. Owen didn't come to dinner. Mrs. Green said he was in the library and didn't want to be disturbed. I sat alone in the drawing room, firelight washing over a wall portrait, Juliana smiling, her blonde hair caught in a soft breeze. I realized then it wasn't a peaceful smile. It looked like a plea. I stood and moved closer. Behind the frame, a strip of wood was split. I eased it back and found a small recess inside another key. The shaft bore a single letter J. My pulse thundered. When the house fell quiet, I made my way to the West Wing. The door was locked. I set the key a perfect fit. The door opened the hinge, sighing like a warning. No one was there. A small lamp cast a weak pool of light. On the bed, the blanket was folded, the lavender brittle and dry. I stepped to the pillow, cold. Then, from behind the curtain, a faint sound. I turned. A woman stepped out. Juliana, no longer muted as before. Her eyes were clear, steady, fixed on me. He said you wouldn't believe me, she said, low and precise. He said you would take his side like everyone else. I just want to understand. Understand? She gave a thin smile. Understand how a man can call captivity love? Call silence protection? I stepped back half a pace, but I didn't look away. I've seen him suffer, I said quietly. I think he's tormented too. Men like him don't suffer, they possess. Juliana moved a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Do you know he loves you? I froze. He loves you, she said, eyes bright with anger and a strange pity. Because you're my replica. He thinks he can start over by loving another version. But no one is truly loved when the other person still carries the corpse of the past. I couldn't speak. He didn't kill me with his hands, Juliana went on, voice fading. He killed me with silence by letting me vanish inside these walls. What do you want me to do? I asked. She smiled. Take Leo away, before he becomes what I became. Then, like a cold gust slipping past, she stepped back into the shadow. Her voice thinned into the room. Don't let him know you saw me. The door eased shut behind her so softly, I wasn't sure it had really happened. I stood trembling, the key icy in my palm. Outside, Lake Waverly heaved, splintering the moon into fragments. For the first time, I understood that Owen Parker's love wasn't only a tragedy, it was a captivity. And perhaps to save Leo, I would have to break the door he himself had built. That morning, the silver-gray sky softened into a pale pink, as if Waverly itself were breathing out warmth after a long dream. I sat by the window, fingers clenched around the key, engraved with J, the only thing left from the night before. In this house, no one knew what had happened, or perhaps they knew and chose silence. Only I remained, my heart still trembling, at the image of the woman in the white dress who had slipped behind the curtain. Juliana. Her name was an echo. Every time the wind moved across the lake, I heard it fine and lovely, but steeped in sorrow. I knew from that moment I couldn't stay. I couldn't go on being a caretaker in a house that had become a prison of memories. But leaving meant taking Leo with me, and that might cost Owen the last fragile piece of humanity he still possessed. At noon, Owen returned. He looked different, quiet to the point of danger. No longer the powerful man I knew, but an exhausted shadow, as if he'd walked through the longest night of his life. He stopped at the steps and looked straight at me. "Vincent says you weren't in your room last night." "I couldn't sleep," I answered evenly. "You went to the West Wing, not a question, a statement. I didn't deny it." "Yes. You saw her." His gaze met mine, deep and dim as the lake's surface. "What did Juliana say?" I didn't speak at once. Part fear, part pity. Finally, I said only, "She wants to leave." Owen shut his eyes and drew a long breath. "You don't understand, Natalie. If she leaves, she'll die. She's already dead." "Owen," I said softly, "dead in this very room. What you're holding onto is a shell, the shadow of a woman who once loved you." He opened his eyes. In that instant, I saw tears, real ones. He stepped closer, gripped my shoulders, voice breaking. "You don't know what it feels like to lose someone who was your whole world. I let her go once, and my world collapsed. I can't let it happen again. I can't lose anyone else, not even you." I froze, because for the first time I heard something unmistakable in his voice: love. But it was the love of a man who had lost the line between salvation and captivity. That evening, I packed. A small suitcase, a few changes of clothes, Leo's medical files, and Juliana's letter. I knew when Owen found out he wouldn't forgive me, but some lines can't be kept in silence any longer. Leo sat on the bed, clutching his teddy eyes, heavy with sleep. "Miss Natalie, where are we going?" "Out of here, Leo." I smoothed his hair. "Somewhere you can run and laugh without anyone listening at the door. Papa will be sad." I bent close, looking into his dark eyes. "Papa will understand, even if not today." He nodded, believing as children do in fairy tales. We walked the long corridor step by step. The house was so quiet I could hear the wind threading the window frames. At the front door, a low, familiar voice sounded behind us. "Where are you going?" I turned. Owen stood there in an unbuttoned white shirt, eyes full of anger and hurt. "I can't stay," I said, "and neither can Leo." He came closer slowly. "You're taking my son from me. I'm taking your son from your obsession." Owen shook his head and gave a thin smile, a soundless crack in the silence. "You think you're different from me, Natalie. You're doing exactly what I did, choosing for someone else in the name of love." I swallowed. "The difference is, I won't lock anyone up to keep them." He stopped, fists tightening, as if to anchor his temper. Then he spoke very softly, as if he feared his own words. "Juliana said the exact same thing, right before she left the bed." Silence. His eyes clouded. "She left, and the lake took her back." "But she's alive, Owen. She spoke to me clear, lucid." He looked at me as if I'd touched a wound that had never closed. "You don't understand, Natalie. The person you met wasn't Juliana. She's what's left inside my mind." I shook my head. "I saw her. I heard her. I felt her breath." He whispered, "Then you touched the deepest part of my guilt." That night I couldn't go. Not out of fear, but because of the look in Owen's eyes as he said those last words. The look of a man who no longer knew where reality ended and memory began. I stayed and waited for dawn. And then the unexpected happened. Mrs. Green's scream tore down the hall from the West Wing. I ran. The door was flung wide, lights blazing. On the bed, Juliana was gone. The blanket was ripped. The window stood open, curtains thrashing in the wind. On the tile floor lay a silver necklace engraved with 2 letters. J.P. Owen appeared, rushing and eyes wild. "Where is she?" No one answered. He looked around like a man who'd lost his soul. Then he looked toward the lake. We followed. Outside, the sun was rising, gold and orange, spilling across the water. And through the pale mist, a woman in a white dress stood faintly visible, standing in the lake, arms outstretched. Owen shouted and plunged in. I ran along the shore, heart-splitting. He swam hard toward the figure, even as it thinned into mist. "Juliana," he cried, voice breaking. "Don't go! Please!" But the white shape only turned and smiled, gentle as the first light of morning. Then she vanished. No sound, no struggle. only small rings of water spreading outward folding into the brightening lake. Owen reached for emptiness, then quietly sank. I screamed and went after him. The cold knifed my skin. I dragged him back with everything I had. He collapsed on the shore, breath a thread. Let her go, he whispered. At last, I let her go. I gripped his hand, tears mixing with lake water. Owen, you have to live. For Leo. He gave a faint smile. His breath warmed my cheek. Tell our boy. His mother is free. Morning light washed over his face, blurring the edge between life and death. 1 year later. Spring returned to Waverly. The manor had been sold. Leo and I live in a small seaside town in Maine, in a weathered blue cottage. Each morning, I still hear the surf still make coffee for myself and cocoa for Leo. Some nights when the wind moves through the window, I hear a distant song, no longer eerie, but warm, like a greeting from far away. Leo runs in and points to the sea. Miss Natalie, I see Papa and Mama out there. I smile and look toward the far light where the ocean meets the sky. Yes, sweetheart. They're really there. Dawn glints in his eyes like drops of water. And for the first time, I feel a peace that comes not from forgetting, but from accepting that some loves are only truly set free when we let go. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Every word, every listening heart helps stories like this keep being told and heard.